How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. We are got actually a pretty specific set of things that we're going to talk about today, as the description reads. Over the last week, actually, I've had a lot of interesting conversations with a couple people talking about kind of various different workflow things that come into play. So I wanted to take this particular week and go over two of the main things that kind of like centered around the conversations that I've been having with some people, and basically hopefully have this set as a kind of tool for reference in the future, so that if you're running into a situation and it's like, hey, I want to be able to set my camera up so that I can work faster, and that's kind of where this part of the workflow conversation came in. So that you can you have the knowledge and a reference to be able to set your camera up, have it customized the way that you need it, and utilize one of my favorite tools in the camera, just to speed up that process of getting images from your camera to whatever platform you want to use or work in. And this is a bit in contrast because, we've talked about like how we have LUMIX Lab and we have LUMIX Sync and the various different ways that you can get your images and videos from your camera to your mobile device. But more and more recently, we get a lot of those questions that are kind of like, so I do that for a lot of kind of, casual shooting, but I want to be able to use this in a more professional sense. Like, how do I go about this? Or, maybe not everyone remembers that we add some certain features into the camera and maybe creative ways that you can use them. So we're going to be talking about Frame.io, which I know we've talked about a couple of times on the stream, but we're going to do a dedicated walkthrough again, show you how to set it up, what you want to do with your camera for it, because also I've seen a couple people have some questions about like, hey, I tried to use Frame.io and it wasn't working. How do I troubleshoot that? So I also want to give some tips on how to do that as well. And then probably the biggest thing is knowing that, on a job or out in the real world, when even maybe you're just casually using your camera for filmmaking, being able to set your camera up that works best for you to quickly jump between various recording modes. Now, whether that's a photographic mode or a video mode or different resolutions, things like that, we're going to go through and actually show you step by step how to set the camera up so that you can utilize the C or the custom modes that are available in the camera, and also show you how to unlock the fact that we have way more than just 3 that are written on the mode dial itself. So we're going to go through those throughout the broadcast, like all of these live streams that we do. If you have questions, tag at LUMIX USA in the chat, like you can see a bunch of people are doing here already. I'll just periodically take some breaks and go through and answer some of the questions. Like always, we're going to start with a bunch of questions first, and then we'll jump into the demonstration. Before we jump into that, I want to remind those in the United States about LUMIX Pro services. We have Red and Platinum here in the US. Red is the free level, so if you've picked up a new camera, as I can see some people have, if you've picked up a new camera and you're in the US, at least for what we're talking about right this moment, you can use the QR code on the screen. Get yourself registered for LUMIX Pro Services Red. It's free. It's what gets you your 3-year warranty added on to the product, and it gets you into the portal. So should you ever have a problem with your equipment, you've got a portal for service and support. If you're a working pro or you're someone who just likes having a higher level of service and support to protect your equipment purchases, you can always take a look at the Platinum tier. That is a paid level service. But that gets you things like 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways, 20% off out of warranty. So if you drop or break something, you get your coverage there at a discount. You also get access to a membership hotline. So Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., you have access to speak to somebody if you are running into a problem and you'd prefer you kind of troubleshooting that over the phone instead of going through chat or emails. You still get a really cool welcome kit. I believe the Peak Design strap is still the strap that comes with it today. So yeah, you get a lot of really cool benefits with these programs, and I encourage you to take a look at them. If you're not joining us from the United States, we have the global link down in the description below. That is where you'll be able to see, what's available within your region. And if an LPS program isn't available within your region, know that you still have Panasonic's support within the various regions as well. So you can always take a look at your local region and see what is there for your particular products. So with that, let's take it from the top and take a look at some of the questions that came in here. So Tobias asks, seems counterintuitive, but is it possible to add auto white balance lock? In some light conditions, I have trouble setting white balance manually with a gray card. Using auto white balance lock and locking it off would help a lot. And this is in reference to video recording. So what's actually kind of cool is that with the newest crop of cameras that we've been releasing, so the S5 Mark II, the S5 Mark II X, the GH7, and I believe the GH6, I have to double check on the GH6, and I know that the S9 has it as well. We have added in auto white balance lock function for the cameras themselves. So I've got a little bit of a different setup for the camera this go around. So this is similar to what we were doing last week. So it's just a top-down view of it because I can show you more on the screen for things that don't output over HDMI. But for auto white balance lock, this is something that was added, as I mentioned. And it is something that you find in the menu, so you have to basically tell it like, hey, this is how I want this system to work. I have to remember exactly where it is in the menu because this is one of those features that like you change once and then I've never gone back to change it before. But what it basically is set to do, and for those that have never used an auto white balance lock before, or auto white balance lock, what this is doing is this is basically saying like, hey, use auto white balance, but when I activate something in the camera, right? So if I'm going to be using, just kind of like photographing or creating a video out of it, I want to have the camera say like, hey, whatever I start this clip on, when it took the white balance measurement, leave it at that. Don't consistently update the white balance for it. So you can find it here, as I finally found it. It's under the gear menu, so this is the custom menu for our cameras. It's on the image quality page 1, and then you'll see auto white balance setting. Now, for here, you've got a couple of different options here. You have lock hold with function button. So this means that if you're in a situation where, you want it to hold still for a little while, but maybe you still want to have that quick access to be able to toggle it so that it allows white balance to be updated, but you don't want it kind of fluctuating unless you want it to. You can set it so that, yes, you can do auto white balance lock, but you want to assign it to a function button so that it'll only lock it while you're holding the button. Or you can have it operate the syncing of auto white balance lock with the shutter. Now, this is either while pressing or doing burst shooting. So this is something where the operation with sync is going to be probably a little bit more towards the photography side. So in this case, like most of the time, this for me is usually left while pressing. And then I have my lock hold with function button so that I can come in, press and hold a function button, and then I can go in and lock this and basically say like, hey, for this particular scene, I want to have it lock auto white balance and I don't want it updating until I let go of that button. Now, the menu that you're seeing on the screen here is when you press and hold one of the function buttons, you can reprogram what that button is assigned to for those that have never used it before. And you basically just scroll through this list. You find the option that you want to have assigned to it. In this case, auto white balance lock. We do it there, and then I can press it once, toggles, it's auto white balance locked. Press it again, it unlocks. So this can be really beneficial. For that particular case, Tobias, I hope that is helpful. It's not something that's available on every single one of our cameras, but it is something that's available in the newer generation of cameras that we've come out with. So unfortunately, if you're using something prior to, I believe the GH6, I have to double check with the GH6. But if you're using something prior to that era, you won't have that function in the camera because it's part of the new engine, the new processing that we're doing in the newer cameras. So hopefully that helps. Rhett says, yeah, I think the final white balance tool to know what your auto white balance and custom white balance is so you can copy those settings across cameras would be nice too. Yeah, so I believe Rhett mentioning like, okay, if the camera is able to give you like a Kelvin readout or something like that. That is something that we get a lot of questions about. And we've had, that kind of conversation with our engineers, be like, hey, this is something people would like to see. Is this something that we can, have embedded? Is this captured in the metadata? To my knowledge, especially if you're in video that is captured in metadata, we just don't display it. But I don't know the specifics as to why it's not displayed. If you're doing like a custom white balance so that it tells you what it is. But again, like I said, we've passed that in. We've had those conversations before. And yeah, we just kind of go from there. Let's see here. Carrie, the best day of the week. How's it going? This is a good day of the week. I do like Thursdays. Means that the week's almost over and I get to chill out. Let's see here. Orange, thanks for creating these live streams and continuing to invest in the LUMIX community. Of course. LUMIX community is one of the, kind of like shining points of my week, honestly. Being able to interact with all of you, being able to go on the forums and all that kind of stuff. That's just what I love to do, and I'm glad that the company allows me to do this, and they encourage me to do this. So, let's see here. Where do we go? McGarry, for custom FN buttons, currently they can be set different for rec versus playback modes. Could they differ for photo versus video? Currently in FN, if FN doesn't apply in video, that button does nothing. That's a good point. It has been asked before about, is there a way to toggle function buttons to be dependent based on the mode that you're in? At the moment, no. I don't know if that's something that is relatively easy to code and have build. That's definitely one of those areas where, because I'm not a software engineer, because I don't write code for our cameras, I don't know the complexity of what it would take to do that. But we have had those questions before about how, like, especially because as cameras are so hybrid oriented, right? It is, you buy any camera these days and it's basically going to have the professional level of functionality for photographers and videographers, and that's just where kind of the medium is these days. Knowing that people are going to jump back and forth means that everyone has very different control sets that you like to work with. So we do take that feedback, and the engineering team does work on, finding ways that are, I would say, reliably easy to implement. And then things that are maybe much more challenging, obviously those have to be evaluated as to like how hard is it to do, what's involved to actually do it, and is it even possible to do on the engines that are running in the various cameras. Our modern mirrorless cameras are running some pretty powerful processors in them, but you still put into perspective that camera processors across the board, this is for all of them, camera processors are dedicated processors to do image processing and run the kind of base codes that run the operating systems for these cameras. And sometimes they're very specific in like, hey, look, this is what it was designed to do. We can maybe try to find ways to do other things with it. But it's not as easy as like, say, hey, writing code for like the off-the-shelf processors that you have in mobile devices, like mobile phone, phones, stuff like that. Let's see here. Please bring MP4 Lite to the S5 II, S5 IIX. I would love to see MP4 Lite come across more cameras. I don't know if it's going to, but it's been a lot of fun to use on the S9. DJ says, opinion on creative video features. Could we possibly have the ability to have entirely different exposure settings in PASM for video recording and for photo in one specific mode? Not sure if I'm following what the question is. Could we possibly have the ability to have entirely different exposure settings in PASM for video recording and one for photo in one specific mode? I think, so based at face value, I don't see how that would be possible. Granted, obviously I don't know everything. Because PASM would be a program, aperture, shutter, or manual, so those are your modes, and you would have to toggle between them. In the video side, because it's a software control, changing PAS or M, And that's accessed only by going into the creative movie mode. They are inherently different, so if you change the dial from the creative movie mode that, say, is maybe manual, and change dial into aperture priority, you're changing all of that. I think the issue combining them into one mode would be a little challenging. I don't even know if it would truly be possible, because that would be maybe the concept of pressing the red record button, which would drop you into video while you're in a photo mode. And the camera does have, like by default, the camera does have this option here. So auto exposure in PASM. This basically is if you press the video record button while you're in PAS or M for the photo modes, it will start video, but it'll flip it to a fully automatic exposure. If you turn this off, it's gonna base the video recording exposure on the mode that you're in. Kind of. Not as much control. So if you can elaborate exactly what you mean by one specific mode, I can maybe try to give a little more detail into that one. But yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, FN for video versus photo versus play for future cameras would be cool. Yeah, we've definitely asked about that. So, let's see here. Al says, I remember you once saying something to the effect of normal gray being different for Arilog C3. If there is a brand or specific gray card, you would recommend in that case. So it's not that gray is different. Gray is going to be gray for whatever device you're using. So as an example here, I actually found my video color checker. So this is not a gray card, right? This is a white balance card. So it's a slightly different calibration of what gray is. When you look at what video gray is, you'll see this middle chart, or this middle chip here. That gray is always going to be the same in this case when you're doing it for things like exposure versus you're doing things like for white balance. So this will always be the same. What my reference was there is that what the logarithmic profile is calibrated to or built on for where that gray point should fall on the scale is what changes. So for Vlog V-Gamut, and this is true even for Vlog L, so for the cameras that are running Vlog L, a bit older, those are set for 42 IRE. So if you're using luminance spot meter and a camera has it, you're going to see that when you put that over a video gray chip, it's going to, for a quote-unquote proper exposure, like we kind of talked about last week, you're going to want that to show 0. In Arilog C3 on our camera, it's slightly different. It's a few points different than what Vlog is. I believe it's actually, I think it's actually lower. I have to double check the number. I completely forget exactly what Arilog C3's 18% gray is calibrated to. But that's just a function of, that's what Ari designed the system for. Our Vlog was designed to be on this point. And depending on how you work, it can be kind of inconsequential, as we talked about last week, because there's various different ways that people expose for their footage. And that's going to come down to either the situation that you're in, or if you can control lighting, or if you can't control lighting, or where you want your midtones to be, that kind of thing. That's all that means. The gray cards themselves are going to be, as long as you're buying a calibrated, like a proper one, it's going to be the same gray. The biggest thing to remember, though, is that with gray cards, with tools like this, as they're exposed to light, like daylight or anything, they change over time. So typically what you'll see is in a lot of these devices, especially with stuff like from Color Checker or, I don't know, yeah, my photo one's right here. In a lot of these, you'll see a card on it that's like, hey, this is when I started using this. Let me get that reflection out of there. It's like, this is when I started using this device, and you know, you can also, in this one, you can actually put your name on it in case someone finds it for you. That's a reference to like, hey, I've had this thing for say like maybe 2 years, a year, however long. If you're outdoors a lot with these things, you got to replace them. I highly encourage you to, if you're interested in color, like any kind of color tools like that, check the manufacturers' websites that make it. So like X-Rite, things like that. They'll have like, you know, kind of guidelines on like, hey, these devices, you should be replacing them every X number of months or X number of years, whatever it is. They're not cheap. That's why like when these pocket ones, these passports came out years ago, they were kind of like a really big deal because they were also protective. And the bigger that you go with a color checker, the more expensive they're going to be, or a chip chart, the more expensive they're going to be. You can find like the inexpensive, like foldable ones that look like reflectors, all that kind of stuff. You can buy them cheap. As long as you're buying them from reputable sources, they should be pretty close. But I am a firm believer that for color calibration, the price usually indicates quality in color accuracy tools. So buying a good solid one's going to get you better, so that when you are using it for exposure or white balance or things like that, you're going to have a much more accurate look. And again, as far as workflow goes, it means that you're going to be spending less time necessarily messing around with color to bring things back or change things, unless that's what you love doing. If you love doing that, awesome. Let's see here. D says, after watching another LUMIX user video, is there anything that can be done to expedite the further advancements in LUMIX cameras and S Pro lens lineup? Not sure what you'd basically mean by that, or not mean by that. I kind of know what you mean. Like, what can you guys do as a community to help push things forward? The fact of the matter is, like everything, more cameras sold, the faster you can work on, potentially the faster you can work on projects, change things. But also you run into a thing like we've always talked about for years, that when we update cameras or we bring out new lenses, things like that, we're bringing them out because there are reasons to bring them out. Not necessarily to do like the, hey, here's a new camera. It's like 99% the same as the previous one. We made like these one or two little tweaks that could arguably be either firmware or whatever. And here, buy the new one. We do a lot of support with our products over the life cycle of them. So you do get a lot of things that you know get added in as we kind of refine functionality. Stuff like that does hit a wall at points where it's like, hey, this isn't really that feasible on the existing hardware, so it's going to require new hardware to do it. But as far as that goes, I mean, the biggest thing is, I hate to say it, it's patience. That's a really hard thing in this world in general to kind of have. But know that when we do bring new equipment out, it's very, very heavily like thought through as to why are we building this? Who are we building it for? You know, what's the purpose of this to even exist? Case in point, when the S9 came out, I know a lot of people were looking at that going, hey, I'm a professional. Why the hell would I ever need this camera? But you can see, especially over the last couple of months, as more and more people have been using the camera and you see more and more people in the forums using it, people are kind of getting the point. We built it more as a fun camera, as an option for those that want to get into this world, but maybe don't have the skill or the experience built up yet to like jump feet first into like an S5 Mark II or a Mark II X. Want to get something that's maybe a little more fashionable, because let's face it, the photo video industry, we're filled with a bunch of gray and black cameras. A nice little splash of color every once in a while can be a big reason for people to really want to get into something. And yeah, this stuff just takes a little bit more time, especially now. A lot of companies were, you know, kind of finally back for the most part in full swing after all of the delays from COVID and everything like that. You're seeing a lot of stuff that had to, you know, take a back seat for a number of years, and product life cycles are long. So yeah, that's just kind of where where that kind of stuff is. As far as lenses go, a lot of times lenses, when there are upgrades or when new lenses want to come out, there's a lot of debate that goes back and forth as far as like, well, what lens would be next, what technology is needed for it. If you look at our 100mm f2.8 macro, I think that's a shining example of, look, we had a goal, we knew we wanted to build that. There were no motors designed by anybody that would be able to do what we needed or wanted that lens to do. So we had to build it and design it and patent it. And those processes can take a little bit longer. So when you're trying to differentiate and you're trying to build something that has, true value in this in this industry, sometimes it does just take a little bit longer. But you get a much better product out of it in the end. So Al says normal gray or middle gray. Well, so there's kind of two different things. So when we calibrate, it's on 18% gray is what I guess you would call that like normal gray. 18% gray is used for exposure. You can use 18% gray for white balance as well. Heck, you can use a white piece of paper for white balance as well. It kind of just depends on how accurate you want to go with it. Let's see here. I'll do two more questions and then we'll jump in and talk about the two pieces that I got here for us. DJ says, oh, there's a question from Orange somewhere, but I don't see it. David is asking the question. Okay, there it is. Okay, so David, I will get to your question. So DJ says, caved in, got a G100. I'm now the proud owner of a very large LUMIX camera collection. L² based compact premium. When? That would be an interesting idea. Honestly, you've been around on the streams long enough. Even if I do know something, I can't talk about it. Not saying that I do or I don't, but that's just kind of how it is. I know a lot of people want to see much more advancements, especially now that we have the L² engine, which has powered a lot of the changes that we've had over the last couple of years. And I think what a lot of people have seen, or hopefully you've seen, and part of like what we're going to talk about in a minute here, is that this new engine that we're running has fundamentally changed a lot about what we're doing within the cameras. So we've been able to really kind of focus and say, like, look, we want the, kind of entry level full frame camera. So with the S9, mid to mid high level for the S5. We've got the Micro Four Thirds series, which is a variant of the L² engine. So using the G9 Mark II and the GH7 with its upgrades. A lot of these things, takes a lot of time to come out when you're making such a dramatic shift from the previous, kind of design and the architecture that we were working with on the cameras. So there's always things in the pipeline that are being worked on. And as we get ready to talk about things, when we're ready to talk about future stuff, obviously we get to that point and we talk about it. But until things are ready to be talked about, I got nothing for you. Let's see here. Capture One. We get a lot of questions about Capture One. I would love to have Capture One support within the cameras. Capture One does support the raw editing, but obviously we don't have tether capture in Capture One or Lightroom. We do have Lumix tether. It's kind of an intermediary that you can use, but that's just kind of where we are at this point. All right, and then I'm gonna stop on this last question here from David, and then we'll jump in to the demonstration here. So David says, for shooting video on the GH7, we can use real-time LUTs or my picture profiles that allow second LUT. Is it advisable to use 709 as the first LUT? Is mono lower noise than Vlog as a picture profile? All right, so it's kind of a loaded question there. So for the real-time LUT system, yes, there are the two ways that you can use it. If you use real-time LUT as the just kind of the mode, whether it's the kind of updated version of it in some of the newer cameras, or if you're using real-time LUT, the named profile in the camera, those are always going to be based on vlog. And that is a single LUT applied to it. So yeah, you're most likely going to just do your 709 conversion, or you're going to have a LUT created that includes your conversion to 709 and then whatever tweaks you want to make to the image for a relatively final output. Using the My Photo styles, you can stack your LUTs. In that particular case, yeah, you're going to want to, do a 709 conversion at least as one of them. And then you can apply your, your secondary look or your creative look on top of it. You have the opacity control. I believe, yeah, you want to probably use the 709 as like the LUT 1 and then LUT 2, and then tweak your opacities on them to get yourself kind of where you need to be. The second part of your question is mono lower noise than vlog as a picture profile. So I assume if, like in this case, you're talking about going to a black and white filming, they're different. So vlog and logarithmic profiles, on average, and I have to say on average, have higher noise, especially depending on the codec that you're recording in or the format that you're working in. If you're in, raw video recording, yeah, you're going to have a lot more noise because RAW has no noise reduction. ProRes is probably the next noisiest, has very little to no noise reduction. I don't believe we do noise reduction in ProRes either. So yes, you will have more noise in a ProRes file. When you go to like an H.264, which is probably the most common, although I think that's rapidly changing. H.264, I'd say, would be the next on the tier for noise level. It's an older compression type. You do get higher bit rates, but because the compression is a bit older in style, it doesn't compress noise as nicely. And when you compare different profiles, mono is a profile that was built for photography, so it's going to inherently probably have a little bit more noise reduction than vlog as a base. And then when you go to an HEVC or an H.265 compression, you're going to have much lower noise in H.265 because it's a much higher compression. It's a much more efficient, hence high efficiency video codec. So it kind of goes in that category. If you're looking for the purest, cleanest looking, not purest, if you're looking for the cleanest video file that you want to record, mono or any of the black and white profiles are probably going to give you the cleanest, but you're going to give up other things. They're not going to have the same dynamic range. You're not going to have anywhere near as much flexibility in post that you would with log if you're going to record in log and then convert it to black and white. But that's kind of the beauty of having all of those various modes in there, is that because for you or for someone in your situation, the dynamic range you get out of monochrome may be perfectly fine. You may not need all of that extra work. You may not be someone that wants to spend a bunch of time in post to create a black and white look, or you may not want to mess around with a bunch of LUTs. So yeah, you can use monochrome. Biggest advice I tell people, and it's part of why we're talking about a lot of this stuff today, is understand your camera, use your cameras, because when you get into, as I said in the description, when you get into a groove with your camera, everything speeds up. You spend less time having to worry about what you're doing in post, or, hey, I got to fix this later, or, why isn't it looking exactly like I want it while I'm on set, or while I'm out on an event, or I'm just traveling around for fun with my camera. Why doesn't this look the way I want it to? And it can be frustrating. So we're going to hold on the questions there, and we're going to actually talk about setting this stuff up on the camera. So the first thing I want to talk about actually is the custom mode dial on our cameras. So, this is a good example of, situations where, like, hey, I'm going to go out, maybe I'm going to be recording, and I want to have one mode that's going to be using the monochrome color profile. In this case, I think we'll choose the Leica monochrome profile. And I want to use that for my photography, right? So I'm going to actually set my camera up, and this is the only downside of this setup is you can't see me changing the dials up top, but I'm actually going to put my camera into the aperture priority mode, which you can see right on the bottom here. So you'll see the little A next to, or it's right underneath the audio meters. So what that tells me is like, okay, now I am in an aperture priority photographic mode. You don't see any of the video information there, so you don't see up on top where it says that it's what the video codec is or whatever. You just see raw plus large fine, and you can see now that I'm in like 709 for the profile. So if I want to set this to a custom profile, so a custom mode, so that I can just be a turn of the dial away, what you do is put the camera into the mode that you want to have saved there, set the camera up. So in this case, we're going to come in, we're going to change this to the Leica monochrome color profile, which is my preferred Leica profile. We're going to go to white balance, and let's say I like to use auto white balance, but I typically want to keep this on the warmer side, so I want to use auto white balance W. And then we can also set a bunch of other parameters as well. So let's say I want to have this set so that it's in auto ISO, and my upper limit is 12,800. So cool, we've got that set there. And let's just kind of leave it at that, right? That's probably the vast majority of the stuff that I would set personally for when I want to work with this. Now from here, keeping the camera in that mode, so I am still in aperture priority, I'm now going to go into the camera menu. I'm going to go into the setup menu, which is the, and help if I clicked on the right one, which is the wrench icon. And then I'm going to scroll and I'm going to look for the custom, save to custom mode. This is in the settings menu. And again, it kind of makes a little bit of sense, at least for me it does. In the setup menu are typically things that you're going to change maybe once, maybe twice. You're rarely going to be going back in and out of this menu. So it kind of shows you what custom menu setup is here. So now that I've got my camera in aperture priority, I've got it set with the color profile that I want to use, I'm going to go to save to custom mode. Now this is where it shows me my C1, C2, C3, but you'll notice C3 is 3 dash, and then you have a couple numbers after that. I'll explain those in a minute. So I'm going to go to custom 1. I can press display here, and we're going to change this. So let's just change this to mono for the time being. Oh, and of course I picked the one word that requires you to use the exact same block of letters. So we're going to save that as mono, and then I'm just going to tap yes on this. It's going to ask you, are you sure you want to do this? Because, even out of the box, there's a default set to it. And in this case, yes, I want to overwrite this and I want to save that. So now that's saved. And you can confirm it there. It tells you the name. But now let's say I want to have this set up for a video recording version of monochrome. So I can turn the dial, put myself into the video recording mode here. And in this case, let's say that I want to have the camera set to that Leica monochrome as well. So we'll go Leica monochrome. Let's say that I want to come in and I want to change my ISO values because I want this to always stick to, say, 4000 ISO. I want this to sit at the higher of the dual native ISO. So we're at 4000 ISO. And then let's come in and change one last thing, because for this particular case, I want this to be shooting in the full open gate recording. So in this case, I'm going to do display filtering. I'm going to turn off my proxy filtration. Hit display again. This opens up the entire menu. And say I want to have this set to 6K, 24 frames per second, so I can be recording open gate and get the largest field of information that I want to work with. We're in 10-bit, so everything looks good there. If I want to scroll down a little bit further, you can also change what detection mode you're in. So let's say, in this case, I want this to be set to human, and we want the target part set to the entire human body also. We'll go back one. Keep coming down here. Let's say in this particular case, I want to, because maybe I'm working in this particular case, I'm going to be working with a plugged in microphone over the 3.5, but I don't need power to it. Let's change that there. And then lastly, let's go and not jump pages. let's come in and say that for this particular case, I want this to be set to shutter priority for my exposure. And we're just going to double check and make sure that my shutter speed and gain option is set to angle ISO. So cool. We've got this all set up. Now we are in shutter priority for creative movie mode. This means that shutter is my primary. My ISO value in this particular case I've got locked at 4000. And then I can adjust the exposure by changing the aperture on this TT Artisan lens that I have on the camera right now. So clearly this may not be the best mode that everyone would use, right? So now I go back into the camera menu, come down into setup. Let's save to custom mode, and I want to save this to custom 2. Let's change the title, and we're going to remove this, and let's just call this OG. Let's do OG, and then mono. Let's save, yes, confirm that. Now we're set. So now if I look back at the custom modes, you'll see that I have mono, OG mono, so for open gate mono. But now the last thing that we're going to set here is, let's say I want to come in and I need the highest, frame rate that I can record on the camera. So we'll do 120 frames per second, display okay. And let's say I want to do the full HD 120 all intra option, so you get the best quality at 120 frames per second. So we've got that set there, but I want to change the color profile because in this case I want this one to be in log. So we'll put this one into vlog. We're going to change the exposure tool. Let's change this back to manual. Metering mode's fine. Everything else is good there. But we're going to change the ISO, and we're going to go down into auto, and we're going to set an upper limit of 12,800. So now, cool, right? That's all set up. We can even go in with like white balance and say, let's know that like this is going to be a mode that I'll be using with daylight balanced. So cool, all set. From here, again, just going to go back into that menu, go to setup, save to custom, C3-1, change the title. And we're just going to call this one HS for high speed. So we're just going to go HS, set, yes, yes, good to go. So just to confirm, mono, OG mono, and high speed. So those are the 3. Now, the reason I'm stopping at 3 for this demo is because on the mode dial itself on the top of the camera, you have 3 custom modes. So let's go to my main camera, and we'll show you on this one. Turn the dial on my S9 here. So what you'll see is that you have a C1, C2, and a C3. So these are the 3, kind of hard, quick dial access options here. So as I turn this dial, and that's what you're going to see me doing in a second on the screen, watch the display on the camera because it's going to change as I make those adjustments to the top dial. So right now, let's look out. We'll see, all right, you can see on the camera, I've got it set to full HD 422 10-bit, and I'm at 120 frames per second, and I'm in creative movie mode. Now, I'm going to change this. First, it's going to go to slow and quick. Now I'm in C1, and you'll see that everything changed here to the monochrome stills profile that we created. So we see that I'm in aperture priority. I have the Leica monochrome, auto white balance, warm, and it's set for auto ISO. Cool. But now I want to do the open gate video recording. So now I turn it once more. Now I'm in my 6K open gate 24 frame with my ISO locked at 4000, with my shutter speed being set as the exposure tool for the creative movie mode, and good to go. And when I move it to that third one, now we're in the 422 10-bit all-I, 120 frames per second, in daylight balance with auto ISO, and we're back into the manual exposure for the creative movie mode. That's how easy it is. It's a lot of little setup at the beginning, but now all I have to do is just change this dial, and each of those modes are accessible without having to dig through a whole bunch of settings. The other cool thing is that if you look on the bottom left, right above the audio meters, it'll tell you as you're toggling these which one you're in. So that's why it's important to also name them. Because if you're working fast and you've got the camera to your face and you can't really necessarily look down at the top of the camera and see which mode you're in, it'll tell you on the screen which mode you've changed yourself into. So high speed, OG mono, and then we have the photo one. Now, thing you may have not noticed is that in the photo one, I have no info display set up on it, because in this particular case, I don't want info display. I want to really as clean of an image as I can, and in this case, I just want to know my stabilization, so that's why I have the stabilization IS statoscope enabled on this, so as you move, you'll be able to see that little bouncing ball move and kind of allow me to get a really good solid kind of lock on the image. Before we end that topic, the other thing that I meant to say here is, so if you are in the setup menu and you're looking at where the settings are for custom, you'll also see custom mode settings here. Custom mode settings, when you go into this, is how you can change a couple of the parameters that the custom function, or not custom function, the custom modes offer you. By default, this is going to limit the number of custom modes to 3. So only 3. When I go into this, you'll see I can unlock up to 10. So you can have up to 10 different custom modes on this camera. You access these by turning the dial to the C3 option. So this is in custom 3. And when I press the menu set button, it'll default to this menu option, which lets you toggle down through all 10 of them. So you do have a lot more customization on these than you have at kind of face value when you first look at the setup. The other part in here that you have access to, when we go in and we look at the custom mode settings, you can adjust the titles. You also have how to reload custom settings. A lot of times as you're jumping between these, you may find like, hey, I made a change somewhere, and when I go back, it's reflected or it's not reflected. Say you want to be jumping between these and you want to be able to have certain things persist while you're on a single power cycle. The way it's set by default is that when you change that dial, if you go back to the other mode that you came out of, it'll default to what you carbon copied into those settings. That's because it's set so that your C1, 2, 3 through 10 are always going to be the default original that you applied. But if in the middle of shooting, you're like, hey, I may have to adjust white balance and I don't want to run through the thing of as I'm changing these, it constantly keeps going back to the original white balance set, you can come in and you can turn this off. Remember, though, that this means that you're actively altering your custom function while you're within a singular power cycle. So if you do change record mode and you have that off, I highly recommend that you do turn the power on and you change this on. This means that if you want to reset your custom functions back to what you saved them to originally, power cycle your camera. The return from sleep one, this one's hit or miss. If you're someone who's going to leave your camera on and you run the power cycle or the power saving options, I would leave this off if you're going to be someone who's constantly needing to change little pieces of your custom settings. Because what this will do is if the camera goes to sleep and then wakes back up, it'll revert to what those saved settings were originally, which means you then have to go back in and change some of your other settings. So yeah, that's the overview of the kind of custom setup. There is one other piece, and I always forget to talk about it, is select loading data. You can have it where your C1 through C310 by default are going to copy over your f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO sensitivity, as well as white balance. You can go in here and say, hey, I don't want those being copied over from what you have it set. That can be useful if it's like, hey, I'm always going to be changing those settings within these. I'm only using my C1 or my custom modes for things like maybe frame rate. I always know I'm going to be changing those other options. So you can have these and just turn these off when you do your initial saving, and it won't copy those things over to the mode that you're in. So yeah. So hopefully that was a good, clear overview of how to set up the custom modes on your camera. I'm going to take a couple of questions, and then we're going to talk about Frame.io for the last like 10-15 minutes here. DJ says, can you expand on what files we can or can't transfer to phone using the app? How can we use our phones as a remote FTP server communications during press events? So if you're using Lab or Lumix Sync, the apps will allow you to transfer JPEGs, RAW files, and MP4 videos. You cannot transfer MOV files through our apps. Part of this is compatibility. If you try running MOV files and say you grab 10 of the average phones that you have across the population globally, you're going to find very different experiences for MOV files across mobile devices, whether it's Apple or Android. Not everything supports MOV properly, and when you're running in some of these higher frame rates and bit rates and file sizes, it also runs into more of a practical challenge that MOV files are gigantic, or they can be. So you run into where it's just not practical to transfer them over Wi-Fi. So it's got to be an MP4. If you wanted to use your phone as something like a remote FTP service, this is where, DJ, the next part that I'm going to talk about may be much more beneficial for what you're looking to do, to a point. I don't think it's going to fully address it, but this is where Frame.io, I think, has a much better setup for you, especially if you're an iPhone user, because Frame.io has an app specifically for iOS. I wish they had one for Android. They only have one for iOS. Where did the other question go? Cave, that one. Where do we go? What I meant in DJ was what I meant into mode is that if I'm in M, I want one whole set for photo and one whole set of exposure settings the moment I press the record button, so I can switch without the dial. Gotcha. Yeah, that would be a very interesting, but that would also be a fundamental different way of how we address the video versus photo, because ours is on a dial. I don't think there would be a possibility with the current way that our cameras are designed. So, after last week's gig where I accidentally recorded in 720p on one of my cameras, I fully appreciate you can now filter video codecs. Too bad it wasn't in the older, less kid-resistant cameras. Yeah. I think also, ironically, it's also the fact that we don't do 720p options in cameras anymore. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. David, using the 45 to 175 and 14 to 42 power zoom lens, how can we set the zoom rocker to a program button and or settings? When you are using those lenses, David, one of the things that you'll notice is when you pop the touch tab open, you'll have a slider here. That slider can control the zoom on those two lenses. To my knowledge, that's the only control that you would have in any of the modern cameras that we've got that work with those lenses. File transfer. Is there a way to use the live stream capabilities of the GH7 and GH5 Mark II in conjunction with the Lumix Sync app to perform a 2-camera live stream wirelessly? Unfortunately, no. It's going to be limited to just the one camera. So, yeah. It's just what the one camera is sending out. L-mount power zooms. We have a lot of people asking about those. I have to ask, why is the model of mail shipped upgrade keys still a thing? It's archaic and time and resource wasteful. Why not digital codes users can access to online for firmware keys? I wish I had an answer for that. I've learned a lot about when you're in the higher level of cameras. And by that, I just mean like where the category where the cameras are. You look at a bunch of really high-end cinema cameras. You either run into a whole bunch of things where it's like, hey, if you want this upgrade, you actually have to send the camera into the manufacturer, which I think is absurd for certain things. A good example here. So we do have a mix of some things that are available through a digital delivery. Um, so they have the we have the unlock code for the S5 Mark II, which can give you the raw over HDMI functionality. That one, it's the same code that we've been using for some of the other cameras, or it's the same product that we use for some of the other cameras. So I think you can think of that maybe more as it's kind of just, we already have this stuff, so we're just using it. And that's paper delivery that you get. Then you have potentially stuff like the VP1, so the volume photography option that we have, which, as long as I remember correctly, is a digital delivery. Our volume photography functionality that's added, that was a big project that Matt Fraser works on. That was one of the big things, is this has to be a very direct, easy way to access this unlock for that market, because those users have very specific needs. That's, again, why also, when it comes to volume photography stuff, that's why it can be, to those that are not in that world, you may look at it and say like, oh, well, that should just be included. But at the same time, a lot of times people would say like, well, you're including this, and this is stuff that I don't ever want to use or need, so why am I paying for it? So brand's in a catch-22 with this. But you have functionality, and the way we do it is literally, you purchase the code, you can unlock it on your camera, you're good to go. You don't have to send it in for us to service. It doesn't need to come to us to do anything to install a firmware on it. It's super straightforward, and it offers a lot of functionality that's very critical to that specific group of users who are very sensitive to, I need my camera to do what I need it to do. I need it to do it effectively, and it needs to fit into the workflow and the design that we have, especially because a lot of these, volume photographers have been doing this for decades, and there's a lot of stuff in place. So we adapted and built a camera upgrade specifically for that group, and it's, from all of the use that I've ever had with it, it's awesome, the barcode scanning stuff. So a lot of it kind of just bounces back and forth as far as, the camera industry's always been doing that kind of stuff. When you go really ultra high end, it's either you're sending your camera in for service, or same thing, you're getting a piece of paper that has an unlock code or a dongle or whatever it is in it. But we do see some change to maybe a little bit, more of a modern way of doing some of this stuff. McCary, the only part about custom modes that drives me crazy is if I change my quick menu in any way, the already made custom modes will still have the old quick menu. Correct. Yeah, that is something to keep in mind. Your quick menu stays to the carbon copy that you make on that original one, and there isn't really a way to split that out. So, Cliff says GH7 photo raw bit depth is 12 or 14 bit. It is neither. It is a 16-bit container. So it floats. Joe says, Sean, will there ever be LUMIX integration with Lightroom? The tether process and handoff from LUMIX tether to Lightroom is atrocious. I don't know. Tether, look, we're known way better as a videography brand. We've done a lot of work to, kind of show how much we have built into our cameras for photographers that a lot of people seem to either gloss over, or maybe just don't even know are in there for it. We hear a lot from tethering. I think honestly, Joe, from like your perspective, or people maybe that are within the community or the market that you work in, the more you let us know in places like the comments after the video's posted, the better that message we can tell to our engineers to say like, hey, there is this big group of people, especially in the photography side, that want to see these certain things, and we don't have them. Help. So yeah, that's kind of where I would stick with that one. Okay, last topic for today is another kind of relatively in-depth demonstration here, but it's talking about Frame.io. So we've talked about Frame.io before. I've joined the Frame.io team on their live stream to talk about this before, and it's something that in that conversation I had about, workflows and stuff like that, it came up even more relevant, especially over the last couple of weeks while, like there was holiday travel for a lot of people, and we had a bunch of people that were using, you know, the cameras that I'm in kind of circles with, where, you know, they because they were the photographer or they're the videographer in the family, you know, you're kind of expected to take a whole bunch of pictures for your friends and family. And let's face it, after travel, after spending a whole bunch of time with family, sometimes the last thing you want to do is sit there and be like, okay, now I got to edit all these pictures, or I got to do this, or I got to offload everything, and, you know, go through that whole process, because that's, you know, harkening back to work, right? So it got us, you know, kind of talking about, well, you know, we have Frame.io in the cameras, and I've always used this, and I think I take it for granted because I work for the brand, so I have a lot of close connection with the things that we develop. But I reminded this person, like, hey, we've got Frame.io built into this camera. That means that, you know, if you're going to be photographing an event, or in this case, because we were talking about, you know, photographing and, you know, capturing video of our families over the holidays, this is a situation where it's like, hey, you've got a tool in the camera that, especially if you're going to be in a house, like with a bunch of people, or you've got a good mobile device, you always have access to be loading these things up into a catalog or into a location that you can just send the family a link to, and they have access to it, which means I don't have to even think about, you know, sitting here, taking a bunch of the photos, then taking the card, then putting it in the computer, doing all this stuff, creating a folder to then load them up to, and offload them, and send a link, and so on and so forth. So I want to take a few minutes here and just walk through the setup process again for Frame.io. For those that don't know, Frame.io is the camera to cloud tool that we have worked with. Frame.io is an amazing company. They're part of Adobe, and they've made, in my opinion, one of the best tools for both the professional use case, so collaborative work. So if I'm working with a media agency, or we're working on a project, and, you know, our site's up in New York and they're doing a bunch of photos and I need to give input, it's amazing for that. But it also has a lot of uses for things like social media deliverables, and the way I framed it working with my friend about this was, it's also an incredibly solid, you know, kind of cataloging function because of its integration with Adobe Lightroom. Now, if you don't use Adobe Lightroom, sorry, but what we're going to talk about is tied to Adobe Lightroom. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're looking at my S5 Mark II X here. This is a function found on the S5 Mark II, the Mark II X, and the GH7. So yes, this is not across all the cameras. I apologize if your camera doesn't have it. I understand. But in these cameras, you do have it. So the first thing that you do with this is connect the device to an internet source. Whether that's your phone, a hotspot on your mobile device, your home internet, you know, the Airbnb's internet, your, you know, sister's internet, your brother's internet, your parents' internet, whatever it is, studio's internet. Just connect the camera to the internet. And that's a very easy process just by going into the in and out option under the setup menu. You go to the LAN Wi-Fi functionality, you click Wi-Fi function, and then you can connect into the connection that you want to here. This is one way to do it. If you're doing this specifically for Frame.io, you're going to go to the Frame.io option. You're going to click on this. Then you're going to click on Frame.io connection, or you can just go to connection setup. You want to connect, in this case, over Wi-Fi. Do Wi-Fi connection settings. And you'll see here, if there is no Wi-Fi already connected in this, this will be open, so you'll be able to connect to an internet. In this case, I'm connected to my home network here. So it's already done. So we're going to skip that part because I don't feel like punching in my password and opening it up to people to guess it based on the screen. So once that's done, or you can do this right off the bat, you can click Frame.io connection, and I recommend clicking set and then pairing Frame.io. What this will do is this is going to connect to the network that I have. So I have my home Wi-Fi connection here. This is going to activate that. It's going to set the camera onto the network, and it's communicating to Frame.io. Now you get this number here. So we see this number, the device pairing code. So now, all I have to do is I go to my Frame.io screen here. Yeah, and I set everything up right. So I go to my Frame.io catalog. This is my Lightroom C2C catalog. I'm going to go into camera to cloud connections. I'm going to do add connection. And then I'm going to punch that number in that's on the camera. Once that's there, you'll see that it says LUMIX S52X, Lightroom C2C. This is the catalog that I'm connecting into. I'm going to click authorized. We're connecting into this. In this case, we can go back to the main camera here. It says connection successful. That's my user. That's the project I've connected to. I click OK. It just confirms one more time. Click OK. And then from here, this is where you go to your upload setup. Make sure that auto upload to queue is turned on. You can go to upload file format, and you can pick which formats you want to upload. Your proxy files, your JPEGs, and your RAW. So right off the bat, this means that video files, you can only upload proxies. But for family and a lot of that kind of stuff, proxies are usually just fine. Not everybody, this is an instance where I will say family, friends, things like that don't always need 4K or 6K, things like that. So proxy files are fine. Once that's there and you've kind of picked which options you want, you're going to press set. And now all you have to do is go back to the shooting screen. Let me show the main setup here. And now I just capture images. And the cool thing is you get that little icon showing on the right there. When I go back into my Frame.io catalog, I go to Cloud Device, look at the folder. Here are my stills. It gives me the camera that they were captured on. And there they are. They're loading up. Now I'm loading up JPEGs and RAWs. And everything's kind of going through. These are all uploading. They're processing, and they're going to show. Every once in a while, you'll see like a RAW file may not preview on here. But again, this is more of that. If I'm going to do this for family and friends, I'm only going to upload JPEGs because that's all they really need. And everything's kind of well organized here. I've got the stills. It's cataloged by date. So you're good to go. But now this also does the kind of cool thing where you see in the top left here, I have this little PX icon. So that's proxy recording. So now, if I put my camera into a video mode, we're going to come in really quickly. I'm going to change this into a recording mode that supports proxy files. So you go into rec quality, I can press display. I'm going to change this to any, and then I'm going to turn proxy recording on. This locks it so that you're only going to see the video recording options that support proxy. Anything that's grayed out here means that it's a higher bitrate and I don't have an SSD attached. So we're going to do 60p for this one. C4K 60p. This is a 10-bit all intra. This is a 600 megabit per second codec. Then I'm going to go down to my proxy settings. I'm going to look at this, and let's say I want to load up the full high quality proxy. This is an HEVC file. So as I mentioned before, this is that much cleaner looking compression file because it's much newer, it's more advanced. It's a relatively high bitrate for something like a proxy or something that you would maybe want to deliver on, say, social media or provide to family and friends that they could post on their social media. And it's 60 frames per second. So right now we've got this little setup here. I'm going to change the color profile to 709. And we're just going to do a quick little recording clip here, right? So we're recording. We've got it going. Simple little thing here. We've got it set up, right? I'm going to let this run a little bit so that it creates a large enough file so I can jump between the screens here. But as I'm recording, the kids, the family, the friends, the dog is running around doing something really cool. This is awesome, and I want to be able to share it to my family and friends. I stop the recording. Immediately, you get that icon that says, hey, you've got something going. And on the Frame.io backend, you see video. When I click into this, click over to here, you'll see that it's uploading. If we go back to the main camera, you'll see it's already done. If I go back into the screen here, and we look into this, we'll give this a second to process, and that file will be ready to go. This will all update, and of course it's behind my face cam. This stuff will update, so if we back out of this, click in, once it's actually all ready and processed, we've got it there. It will update. Sometimes this can take like a second or so after it's been processed to say like, hey, This is a, there it is, HEVC codec, 1080p. Its bitrate was actually closer to 20 megabit per second, so you're getting a higher bitrate than necessarily what we were showing in this case. And it gives you all that flexibility. You get a lot of, kind of access to this. Now, the reason why I bring up Frame.io in this particular case is because Frame.io's mobile app allows you to be able to then also take those images and load them right into your phone. So you've got family and friends, you've got, someone who needs a bunch of access quick to this stuff. Or if I'm working in Lightroom, which I didn't even really kind of show too much about this because I don't have my Lightroom catalog opened yet. All of the stuff that I'm uploading into this, the photos, and I believe the videos too, I have to double check on the videos, they're automatically syncing to my Lightroom cloud catalog. So that means the next time when I open up Lightroom, all those images and the video files that I just showed you captured are being pushed into that catalog. So now I have access to them. If I need to be able to go through and make some changes, re-export different versions of it, I don't ever have to take the card out of my camera. I'm good to go. So that whole workflow concept of what we're doing to make things easier for you as a photographer, as a filmmaker, as a hobbyist, as just someone who enjoys using a camera, is really pushing a lot of those tools that allow you to just make it easier, take less stress out of your life, create a whole bunch of cool stuff, and get it off of your camera. Because I love this whole point. A lot of us probably grew up, or maybe our demographics on Lumix Live, I'm fair to say this is most of us probably grew up in situations where, like, our parents, friends, family, even us as younger adults or kids, probably had a bunch of film that maybe we never developed. We never did anything with. It stayed undeveloped. It's the same thing in the modern era. It's just instead of the film, we're using SD cards. How many times have you had stuff on an SD card that you never did anything with? How many times have you had family or friends that pester you because you're the photographer in the group, and they all want photos from the event that they asked you to bring it with you? So yeah, lots and lots of flexibility when it comes to things like the workflow. So everybody, thank you all so much. We've gone a little bit longer today than normal. I just want to, again, say thank you, everybody, for tuning in. The questions, the commentary, the back and forth. How's it going, Geeky Nerdy Tech? It's been a really awesome experiencing, especially through this year, the entire community, the chat, the feedback that we get, the awesome streams that we've been able to do, and a lot of the cool things that hopefully you've all learned with these broadcasts. So yeah, we're good for today. We will be live again next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time as well. For those that are on the photography side, I am still working out the flash photography stream. I think it's going to end up having to be some pre-recorded sessions. I just don't have enough space in here, no matter how I try to organize all of this stuff, to make it make any sense. So that's most likely going to be a recorded segment in with the live stream. So we'll have that. Yeah, I will be covering that with the Godox flashes and the triggers. And then, yeah, I don't know if that's going to be next week. That might be the following week. So that might be one of the last ones for the year. We will be on a break at the end of this year because of the Christmas holiday. And then the first week of January, we will be out because I will be at CES. So if you are going to be going to CES, swing by the Panasonic booth. I will be there. I believe Matt Fraser will be there as well. So come by, spend some time with us, check out the cameras. It's a fun show. They're long days, but we always love connecting with everyone when you swing by the booth. Other than that, yeah, thanks again, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day. If you have recommendations or comments or things that you want to see in the future, drop them in the comments section after this video. If you have topics that you want to see us cover in the future, drop those in the comments as well. It helps us tailor more of this content to what you want to see and learn. And then, yeah, if you don't already, subscribe. If you like the video, hit a like. And check us out over on Instagram or TikTok for however long that's around. Other than that, Take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.